Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. The universities across South Africa have been given an opportunity to decide when and which categories of students will be allowed to return. Under level 3, only 1/3 of students will be allowed back on campuses and at residences. Most of the first group allowed to continue with their academic activities include final year students and postgraduates. Joining us now to give us further depth is Professor Ahmed Bawa, CEO of UNISA South Africa. Prof, a very good morning to you and thank you for your time. There have been new measures that are now allowing students to return to campus. Just talk us through some of the processes that will come with ensuring that students, are indeed safe when they return to campus.
Thank you, Bawa. Thank you for having me on your program. Yes, indeed, the universities are preparing to receive students again. 1/3, as you point out, 1/3 of the students will be allowed to return. Some students actually did return even under level 4, primarily students who were in the medical sciences and who were in their final year and had clinical training to do. But under level 3, many more students will be returning, and primarily these will be final year students. And in particular, those final year students who require lab equipment, clinical training, work-based learning, and so on. So it's students who will be in the position to complete the qualification this year and who require to be on campus. In addition to that, as you point out, postgraduate students will return. And perhaps more importantly, I should just mention that there might well be the reintroduction of students into residences who are particularly vulnerable and not able to access the emergency teaching that the universities have put on the board, if you like. So those will be the primary categories at this point in time. And of course, we are all hoping that by the time we get to July or something, or close to July, that announcements will be made that we can bring in another 1/3 of the students. So.
And what's your order in terms of priority? I mean, you mentioned the postgrad and the medical students that need laboratories, but when it comes to the other faculties, are there any sort of specific priorities that you're looking at?
Well, clearly the students that require to use laboratories will be in that first category as well. And of course, even those students who do not require laboratories, but who will make up the 33% will be allowed back. So a lot depends on the actual universities. Not all of our universities have medical schools. Not all have engineering faculties, and so on. So each university will shape its own 1/3, if you like. And as the minister indicated in his talk, there might well be students who are particularly vulnerable who will also be reintroduced to our residences, so that they can use the facilities on campus to continue with their study.
And why is it such a pressing matter to ensure that this batch of students returns first?
Well, I think the idea was really to try and ensure that final year students who can graduate at the end of this year have every chance to do so. That will be very important because it will provide us with the opportunity of having an intake next year, and so that was the major reason, and of course the 1/3 was based primarily on the need for us to obey the public health requirements that will be necessary for the safe return of students.
Professor, we heard teachers' unions on the primary and high school level speaking about how they feel that the consultation process allowing the reopening of schools wasn't thoroughly done. As a result, we saw a number of postponements and delays to the reopening of schools. When it comes to the reopening of universities and the consultation process that's taken place, are you satisfied with what you've had with the minister?
Yeah, so the universities have all set up something called a COVID-19 response task teams, and on those task teams are representatives of the union. So one would hope that there's been thorough consultation and so on. And I think that the challenge for us is not, it's not just that the universities need to put in place all the kind of the public health kind of requirements, the sanitizing, the distancing, the screening, and so on. It's not just that, but it's also the idea of developing some kind of social compact, which between the students and the staff and the university administration, to try and ensure that everybody follows those requirements, if you like, those public health requirements. In a sense, it really doesn't matter how well universities do in preparing the campus for the return of students if there isn't a close adherence to those public health actions that need to be taken.
And who will be monitoring the public health action that needs to take place? I mean, we've heard of how the primary and high schools have a certain batch of people who will be coming in to ensure that there is indeed compliance.
Yeah, well, as you saw yesterday, the minister was at Shwada University of Technology and so on. So I suspect that there will be those kinds of visits to the campuses on a regular basis. But at the same time, the universities are all working with the local departments of health to try and ensure that if there are outbreaks, there are protocols in place to understand how to deal with the outbreaks and so on. So there's also that kind of involvement going on. And of course, those universities that have health science faculties will be using their own capacities as well to try and ensure that there's a close kind of adherence, if you like, to the requirements of of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
And very lastly, before we let you go, Prof, in monitoring what the primary and the high schools have had to deal with in terms of ensuring compliance and adherence and the planning that comes with it, the zigzag sort of markings to ensure social distancing and all of those really crucial elements, are you confident that they will be thoroughly and well carried out across the universities and that enough preparation has been done? I mean, we've seen how the schools have done orientation around that the preparation cannot be taken lightly.
Yeah. So we are getting reports on a regular basis about the preparations that are being undertaken at the universities. You have to remember that the universities are very different from the schools. When you have a return of a third of the students at any one of our universities, you're talking about 10,000 students, on a site, if you like. Yeah. Yes. And I think that's primarily the reason for my earlier point, which is to say that this has to be co-managed, that there has to be kind of a deliberate change in behavior of staff and students at the same time that universities are also rolling out these preventative measures, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.